We did it
And
because
we
we
did
were
it
locked
because
in
we
this
were locked
struggle
in
with
this
the Soviet
struggle
Union.
with the Soviet Union.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are set to begin the Defense and Strategic Studies Plenary Session 1 of the 11th International Research Conference of General Sir John Kothalavala Defense University. I invite you to take your places and be ready. This plenary engages with the theme, Securing Professional Excellence Through Collaboration, Military Stakeholders' Approach to Security. We shall begin the session without further ado. Let me now invite Brigadier Upali Rajapaksha, Dean, Faculty of Graduate Studies, to introduce the chairperson for this session.
Distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor, I am delighted to welcome you all back in the auditorium after the refreshments, and it is the time for us to commence the core of the conference plenary. Ladies and gentlemen, it unfolds along the theme, Securing Professional Excellence Through Collaboration, Military Stakeholders' Approach to Security. To enlighten us on this theme, three eminent defense and strategic studies practitioners and experts have accepted our invitation as guest speakers. And speakers from India, Pakistan and Sri Lanka are presenting their papers during this segment of conference plenary, the Defense and Strategic Studies Plenary 1. Ladies and gentlemen, to navigate this most important session of KDU International Research Conference 2018, we have here with us today Honorable HMGS Palihakkara, former Foreign Secretary and former Governor of the Northern Province, as the chair. Mr. Palihakkara retired as Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka on 31st December 2006 after 37 years of civil and diplomatic service. His last diplomatic assignment abroad was as Sri Lanka's ambassador and permanent representative to United Nations in New York in years 2008 and 2009. He served as Commissioner on Presidential Commission on Reconciliation and Lessons Learned, LLRC. He was the chairman of UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament Matters, United Nations Headquarters, New York, in year 2012. President of Sri Lanka appointed him the Governor of the Northern Province in February 2015. He does visiting lectures on international relations, foreign policy, peace and security studies at several Sri Lankan academic training institutions. A Bachelor of Education Honours graduate from University of Ceylon, Peradeniya. He received a Public Service Commission appointment to the Sri Lanka Public Service in year 1969. He entered Sri Lankan Foreign Service in 1979, underwent diplomatic training in Australia in 1980, and was a UN Disarmament Fellow in 1980s. Mr. Palihakkara previously served as Sri Lanka's ambassador and permanent representative to United Nations in Geneva, and the leader of Sri Lanka delegation to the UN Human Rights Commission and the Conference on Disarmament, the UN multilateral negotiating body on international arms control and security matters in the years 1997 to 2000. He was Sri Lanka's ambassador to Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and permanent representative to Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, Bangkok, in the years 2000 to 2004. Ladies and gentlemen, during the period 2002 to 2003, he functioned as Acting Director General, Deputy Director General of Sri Lanka Government Peace Secretariat. He was Director General Multilateral Affairs at the Foreign Ministry, Sri Lanka, from 1995 to 1997, covering inter alia work relating to human rights, preventive diplomacy, peace building, arms control, non-proliferation matters, etc., etc. Previously, he served in a number of multilateral diplomatic assignments at the Sri Lanka missions accredited to the United Nations in Geneva, Vienna, and New York, representing Sri Lanka at deliberations and negotiations related to international peace and security, disarmament, human rights and humanitarian affairs, and economic and social affairs. He served as the first chairman of the Governing Council in year 2007 of the newly reconstructed Sri Lanka's Institute of Tourism and Hotel Management, the first public-private partnership venture in that area. His other work includes Member Board of Directors, Regional Center for Strategic Studies, Member Board of Studies, the Bandaranaike Center for International Studies, Member Board of Directors, Lakshman Kadiragamar Institute of International Relations and Strategic Studies, Member Governing Council, Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok, Member Panel of Ambassadors advising the UN Human Rights High Commissioner, Geneva, Member UN Secretary General appointed Intergovernment Expert Group on the UN Comprehensive Study on Nuclear Weapons and International Security. Born on 21st February 1947, Mr. Palihakkar is married to Sujita Lakshmi, a science teacher at a national school in Sri Lanka. They have a son, a software engineer. While thanking him being here with us today, accepting our invitation, I now cordially invite Mr. Honorable HMGS Palihakkar to the stage and chair the Defence Plenary Session 1. Meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call upon our eminent guest speakers in this plenary, Dr. Arvind Gupta, former Deputy National Security Advisor and Secretary and Director, Vivekananda International Foundation, India, Major General Mohammad Shamrez Salik, Director General, Institute for Strategic Studies, Research and Analysis, National Defence University, Pakistan, Mr. Rabinath Arya Singha, Additional Secretary, Economic Affairs and Trade, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Honorable Palihakkar will also introduce the presenters of the Defence Plenary Session 1 to the audience. Honorable HMGS Palihakkar, former Foreign Secretary and former Governor of the Northern Province. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much. May I speak from here? Thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you. As was announced, we are beginning our session 1. This is the business segment of the session, and after such a colorful performance and two very distinguished and I would say sobering presentations by two very eminent scientists, scholars. It is a bit of an anticlimax, it would appear, for us to start the business session, but I am encouraged by the fact that they brought out, the two presentations brought out a number of issues or dimensions or non-traditional dimensions of security that I'm sure will be discussed by our eminent panelists, three panelists who are here. But while I'm encouraged by that, I'm not so encouraged by the time available to us because we are short of time, so I will not go into a lengthy introductory remarks first, so let me leave this prepared text behind, aside rather, and go straight to the business. We will address three main topics here under the broad overarching theme of securing professional excellence through collaboration, military stakeholders' approach to security in a business-like way. And first we will be speaking to challenges facing international cooperation on what is described as unconventional security threats, And secondly, we will be speaking to the military and national security, a national perspective of a important country, Pakistan, of our sub-region, and finally touching on the overarching thematic context, which will be professionalism in the battlefield and beyond. So, without spending too much time further on my remarks, maybe we can talk about it later. Let me introduce our first speaker. He is Dr. Aravind Gupta. He is the director of the Vivekananda International Foundation, a Delhi-based independent think tank focusing on foreign policy, defense and security related issues. And Dr. Gupta was a Deputy National Security Advisor and headed the National Security Council Secretariat in the Government of India. He was Director General of the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, where we have had the fortune of having many interactions with him for his analysis and insights. And of course, he was a former diplomat of the Indian Foreign Service and honorary professor in the Department of Defense and National Security Studies, Punjab University, Chandigarh. I would now like to invite Dr. Gupta for you to take the floor. Well, originally the time allocated was 15 minutes, but please, we will try to manage.
Okay, so within 15 minutes. Okay, no.
Even before that, I wouldn't mind.
Okay, very good. So, you want me to speak from here or shall I go there?
As you wish. Yeah. Maybe.
Okay.
Do you have a screen?
No, I'll just make a few.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, my fellow co-panelists, distinguished audience here, let me begin by first thanking the organizers, the Vice Chancellor and his team to invite me to this very important conference. And we have this morning heard the role that KDU is playing in organizing such conferences, bringing a lot of professionals from various countries together and raising professional competence, not only in Sri Lanka, but elsewhere also. Now, we have also heard two uplifting, extremely knowledgeable presentations on issues which touch us, each one of us as individuals, as citizens, as human beings. And I think we must relate what we say here today to the what was mentioned in the morning. Now, the topic that has been given to me is the challenges for international cooperation in the context of unconventional security issues. My job has been lightened by the presentation in the morning, and we heard about the need for sustainable development, the need to bring in ecology into our development models. And we also heard how climate change today is a threat multiplier, and it can really exaggerate or accentuate the threats that we already are facing. Now, the rising salience of non-traditional security issues is known to all of you. I will not spend much time on it. But one thing which comes out very clearly from all the discourse is that so far there does not seem to be a proper theoretical framework in which to put these non-traditional security issues and overall look at the security issues. Yeah, yeah. Of course, there was been a discussion on this, and many conferences have been held. We have heard of Club of Rome. We have heard of Shared Future conferences, which took place way back in the 70s. The in 1983, there was this academician, Ullman, who gave a definition of national traditional security issue in which talked about those issues which degrade the quality of life and those issues which narrow the range of policy options, etc. So these were the first attempts to broaden the concept of traditional security issues, which are essentially military related, defense of sovereignty, defense of motherland. These were the basic issues which the national security was dealing with at that point of time. But these, in the 70s and 80s and then 90s, when climate change became a very important issue on the agenda of international community, the concept of national security was being broadened. And that is, and then around the turn of the century, we had the UN Secretary General. He set up a high-level panel and a panel of experts, and they broadly identified six clusters of six broad clusters of non-traditional security issues, which included things like war between states, violence within states, like civil wars, large-scale human rights abuses, etc. Then poverty, infectious disease, environmental degradation, and then, of course, nuclear, radiological, chemical, and biological weapons, and terrorism and transnational organized crime. But as we went along, I think even this seems to be a very narrow conceptualization of non-traditional security issues. And today we are talking in terms of almost all developmental issues being securitized. And that, of course, is also a matter of debate whether we should be securitizing the developmental issues. But as we heard, things like climate change, they have a major impact on national security, because now the short point is the human security now is entering into national security in a big way through these national security, the non-traditional security issues. And a lot of these issues are to do with, they actually arise at various levels. So on one hand, you have all the planetary processes, the way we have exploited our environment, the planetary processes, the global processes, the natural physical processes, they being tinkered by man-made activities. And of course, at the other level, we also have the traditional issues of, which arise out of politics, and they arise out of interaction among states, among people, and of course, within the states, the issues of governance, etc. So the concept of security has now really broadened very well. But it is not something that is happening today. And as was mentioned in the morning also, there was this Pali saying which was mentioned, but let me also give you a quotation from the Rig Veda, the ancient Hindu text, probably the oldest text in the world, which described plants as the saviors of humanity. In a 63-verse long hymn in Sanskrit language, it says, and I quote just one or two sentences, "Let what I dig from thee, O earth, rapidly spring and grow again. O purifier, let me not pierce through thy vitals or thy heart." So there was also this respect for nature, and there was also this asking for forgiveness for using nature. And similarly, the Padma Purana says, "The cutting of a green tree is an offense punishable in hell." So this was the kind of a respect that was there. And I think the point that was being made in the morning, and which is with what I agree, we must go back to that. And you see, the second presentation, in a way, tried to tell you how human beings are trying to, tinker with nature. And the last remark of the speaker was that, do we want to act as God? But I think that kind of a situation, a lot of ethical and moral issues have come in, and that kind of a situation where we are beginning to tinker with nature in a big way, it's all coming back on us. And I don't think human beings will be able to handle if the nature or natural processes go out of control. And that's why I think the speaker also said the Homo sapiens have been there only for a few million years, and what will happen after a few million years. And he reminded us what happened on Mars, when the Mars has become a dead planet, and is that the fate which is awaiting the Earth, etc. So this is the background in which I would like to just make a few points about the international cooperation. It's not that international cooperation has not succeeded. It's also a given that these global problems cannot be resolved without the international cooperation. And there are many examples of international cooperation having succeeded. And just to give you one example, like for instance the Montreal Protocol. There was this concern about ozone hole and its impact on human health, etc. There was an agreement on Montreal Protocol in the 80s, and by and large, international community has been cooperating. Then we have had many examples of successful treaties like the Outer Space Treaty or the UNCLOS, and now of course the Paris Accord on Climate Change, etc. So there are these examples which are there in front of us. But yet there are many, many issues on which I think we have not been able to make substantial progress. And let me identify 5 or 6 points which really come in the way of, which is by way of a challenge to international cooperation. The first is politics, or the lack of consensus. In big issues like this, and particularly when the sphere of, or the scope of security is broadening, it's very difficult to build consensus, and the politics comes in, and a lot of geopolitical issues, etc. come in. Related to that is when you negotiate, you always negotiate with a mutual suspicion. Will I lose something? Will the other person will gain something? And there is a lot of game theory which goes into it. People are calculating. You know, negotiations means it's give and take. So when it's a question of give, people become very careful, and often some kind of a mutual suspicion comes in. And let me take you an example from a different field, which we have not discussed today. And it's like for in the internet or the cyber security. We don't have norms for norms of behavior in cyberspace today. All the efforts so far in developing these norms have failed. We have not been able to. And now there is this idea of data sovereignty, that data which is generated within our countries is my data. The infrastructure which is there is my data. Now, and the European Union has come up with this General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and the Americans have come up with something what they call the Clouds Act, and there is a discussion in many other countries also, including in my country, India, about how to handle this data. There is no agreement. There is always a mutual suspicion, and there is this fault line which is dividing the international community on as to what this data means. Should the internet be free, open, or should it be shareable? And if it is shareable, what kind of norms, etc., should be there? So this is another one. The third issue is that lack of capacity. Even if we agree, how do we build capacities? This varies. Supposing everybody agrees that we should be cooperating on, let's say, disaster management. But managing disasters, the capacity that is required, even the richest countries, most advanced countries do not have the capacity to deal with. So lack of capacity also comes in a big way, and there is of course a lot of discussion, and lack of capacity is related to resources, and the resource sharing is a very big issue. The fourth issue is the regional institutions. Of course, there are many regional institutions which are functioning, and some of them are functioning very well. But again, I think not all regional institutions function very well, and there again, issue of building consensus and coordination, etc. comes in. So while the problem is global, the solutions are local, and the regional institutions, they vary, their capacities vary, and again the institutions vary, I mean the interests vary, and different regional institutions also have different agendas, etc. So the coordination becomes very important. And I think we have now the fifth point is about the non-state actors. Non-state actors simply do not conform to what we are talking. They have their own agenda, they have their own way of looking at it. And we've seen in the context of terrorism how non-state actors are today, they're everywhere, and sometimes non-state actors are also supported by states. And I think this is happening in cyberspace, for instance. Many people are using non-state actors states are using those non-state actors. Again, the question of how to deal with non-state actors, and non-state actors very often are bigger. For instance, many of these mafias or networks which are in human trafficking or drug trafficking, etc., so they're so huge that they challenge the state sovereignty, and states find it very difficult to talk to each other, but non-state actors, I think they have wonderful networks and they're using technology also. Then my last point, I think is it the last point, almost the last point, is about the weaknesses of the international law and regimes and norms and processes. So you make, after a huge amount of effort, you come up with some kind of a agreement or a convention, and then people leave it. And we are seeing this happening with the climate change, where the United States, which worked for that Paris Accord and has now left it. And I think many other countries would also do it. And we have also seen this joint plan of action on the nuclear with Iran. The United States and other countries work together, but they have now left it. So this creates a whole, demoralization, and it creates many, many complications, and international cooperation suffers as a result. So in conclusion, I would like to say that the global problems require global cooperation, but I think there is also a need to go back to our civilizational thinking. This is something which was meant in the morning, and this is something which I also said. And in this context, I just want to draw your attention to one initiative which was taken by Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe a few years ago, in 2015. This was, in a way, the theme was conflict avoidance and environmental consciousness. And that is where a lot of our non-traditional security issues can be put in. And this was called a Samvad. Samvad means a dialogue. The idea was to look at the old civilization of Buddhism and Hinduism and see what is it that they have to say, some of it that we can bring in for in our modern today contemporary discourse, and see whether we can solve some of these problems. 4 meetings have been held so far, and the 5th meeting might be held in Sri Lanka, maybe next year sometimes. And here, a lot of people, very knowledgeable people from the Buddhism and from Hinduism, but they also brought in people from Islam, they also brought in people from Christianity, and they also brought in people who do not necessarily belong to any of these religions, but have some interest in old civilizational thinking. I think we should go back to our civilizational roots, try to see how is it that 5,000 years, these civilizations have survived. And today we are talking about, we do not know what will happen in the next 50 years. So I think this Samvad, which is a dialogue which should certainly broaden, and there can be many branches to this dialogue, but this is the way I think we should be looking at it. Thank you very much. I hope I kept to the time.
Thank you very much. Yes, you did indeed. Thank you very much for that very condensed but comprehensive presentation, especially your suggestion that even in addressing unconventional threats, one can benefit from conventional wisdom, and that's a good takeaway point. The next speaker is Major General Mohammad Samrez Salih, and he generally is a graduate of Command and Staff College, Quetta, and National Defense University, Islamabad. He has a master's in defense and strategic studies, and has MPhil in public policy and strategic security management. He has 33 years of service and has served on various operational as well as other duties, including from United Nations Military Observer to many civilian positions, from Assistant Private Secretary to Chief of Army Staff to Vice Chief of General Staff at General Headquarters, and he is presently serving as Director General, Institute for Strategic Studies, Research and Analysis. And the General will be speaking to the topic, Military's Approach to Uphold National Security, Pakistani Perspective.
With the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. First of all, thanks to the chair, Mr. Paliha, for wonderful introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, in the morning, I had opportunity to listen to eminent and accomplished speakers, and it made me realize how small I am in knowledge as well as accomplishment as compared to them. It is indeed a privilege and honor for me that for the second consecutive year I am coming to KDU to deliver a talk. I am thankful to the KDU administration for affording me an opportunity to dilate upon a subject of immense importance. I should make an endeavor to put across Pakistan's perspective by contextualizing few historical events posing multiple security challenges, some of which persist till to date and are likely to project into the future also. The discourse will also include a mention of the efforts made by Pakistan military in tackling these challenges and thus defining its peculiar approach towards upholding national security. I would very humbly mention that the most of the things that I will say today are based on the practical experience of Pakistan Armed Forces in dealing with national security issues, as well as my personal experience of serving in the military for over 34 years. Given the short time at my disposal, I will cover the subject based on the headings as shown on the slide. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to the context. Pakistan, the country, is associated with two words, that is turbulence and resilience. History of Pakistan, ever since her creation, is replete with turbulence, wars, calamities, disasters, and to cap it all, with dismemberment. Pakistan has reached the age of 71, passing through all these tumultuous times. Every other day, Pakistan was seen standing at the crossroads of its history. On every crossroad, while enemies of the country were exuberant and keen to see it drowning, the nation itself came off with confidence, self-assurance, and maturity. I would say resilience, thy name is Pakistan, best explains the resolute people of the country. The resilience of Pakistan can be best described by recounting the challenges she withstood. At the time of creation, Pakistan was akin to a hapless newborn thrown outside in extreme cold weather. Enemies of this newly born child were keenly and anxiously watching and hoping for her to perish. Inequitable distribution of resources at the time of partition was another huge challenge. The challenging of managing two wings 1,000 miles apart with a hostile enemy in between was preordained. This fragile child, with utter scarcity of resources, faced war with a much bigger and resourceful neighbor right after the birth. Pakistan lost her founding father in the first year of her life and was also subjected to external aggression at the same time, that is 1948 Kashmir War. Apart from intermittent calamities and disasters, only 18 years down the road, the country was yet again confronted with aggression on eastern borders, that is 1965 war. After the war of 1965, the country was still reeling out of a cascade of shocks that in 1971, merely 25 years old and 6 years from its last war, the country was struck again, with this time with the heinous design of dismemberment. The eastern wing was thus lost due to what Robert D. Kaplan calls revenge of geography, and the country had to withstand worst of the disasters of her life. The miseries did not end here. 8 years after the dismemberment, the bear entered the backyard. Pakistan faced an existential threat which she aimed to ward off with the support of second superpower, that is the US. Pakistan fought a 10-year war as a front-end state and played a key role in the victory of the United States in the Cold War. Calamitous entry of the bear in the backyard had long-term ill effects for the country, which are being faced even today. Victory against Soviet Union in Afghanistan was succeeded by chaos in Afghanistan and instability in Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say that seeds for 9/11 were sown right then and there once the United States decided to abandon the region in a mess, and this chaos in backyard led to new form of war. The 9/11 attacks on US soil led the second superpower, the sole superpower by then, once again to the backyard of Pakistan. Pakistan once again assumed the role of a front-end state and fought a 15 years war on terror. This was indeed the longest and bloodiest Pakistan war that Pakistan has fought. In a nutshell, it can be concluded that for half of our life, Pakistan has fought wars, either its own or someone else. In the remaining half, there were political turmoils, havocing floods, devastating earthquakes, and whatnot. Constant existential threats on our borders have thus been shaping the military approach towards national security. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen, for a long lesson on history, but while it may be a history for you, it is still very much a live issue for us back home. Apart from its traditional and expected role, elements of military, especially Pakistan Army, has been repeatedly called upon for the tasks like law and order situations, civil disobedience, disturbances, natural calamities, and disasters. Pakistan's military has clearly defined constitutional role to prevent and stop further expansion of such activities. Now, national security challenges confronting Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, the security challenges facing Pakistan are complex and intertwined with issues relating to identities, modernization, globalization, and specific set of regional and geographical circumstances. Located at the confluence of South Asia, Central Asia, Middle East, and Persian Gulf, Pakistan has remained and is still at the center stage of global power struggles. Pakistan's threat matrix is unique because of perpetual hostility on the eastern border, porous, volatile western border with Afghanistan, and internally fragile internal security situation causing a triple stretch on the security apparatus. The role of Pakistan's military in national security issues therefore transcends into many domains. Here I would like to dilate upon certain challenges which primarily concern the military security. Towards our western borders, Soviet invasion of Afghanistan left enduring marks on the collective psyche of Pakistani nation, playing havoc with our fragile socio-political and economic structures. It turned the entire region into a breeding ground for terrorism, which has greatly impacted national security of Pakistan. We had to embrace over 3 million war-torn Afghan refugees with open arms, which led to overpopulation and law and order problems. United States won the Cold War, Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan, whereas Pakistan was left high and dry. Pakistan was bound to be affected by the mess created by arms and drug runners and militants. Nevertheless, we tried to manage the situation at our own till the events of 9/11, which followed change of regime in Kabul. Unfortunately, in Afghanistan, United States' success of 2003 was lost when resources were pulled out prematurely for war in Iraq. Today, after spending over $1.4 trillion, the situation can best be described as a stalemate. But to our reckoning, the cause of stalemate is not only the Haqqani network or Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan, as they had almost been defeated 13 years ago. It was the pursuit of a wrong strategy which led to this resurrection. Let me say that the popular assertion of TTA not being defeated in totality due to presence of part of their leadership in Pakistan is not correct or whole truth. We defeated Al-Qaeda and TTP while their safe havens still exist in Afghanistan at a mere fraction of resources employed on the other side of the border. Let's watch what ex-US Secretary of State once said about this problem.
We also have a history of kind of moving in and out of Pakistan. I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago. And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union. They invaded Afghanistan, and we did not want to see them control Central Asia, and we went to work. And it was President Reagan in partnership with the Congress, led by Democrats, who said, you know what, sounds like a pretty good idea. let's deal with the ISI and the Pakistani military, and let's go recruit these mujahideen, and let's get some to come from Saudi Arabia and other places, importing their Wahhabi brand of Islam so that we can go beat the Soviet Union. And guess what? They retreated, they lost billions of dollars, and it led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there's a very strong argument, which is, it wasn't a bad investment to end the Soviet Union, but let's be careful what we sow because we will harvest. So we then left Pakistan. We said, okay, fine, you deal with the stingers that we've left all over your country. You deal with the mines that are along the border. And by the way, we don't want to have anything to do with you. In fact, we're sanctioning you. So we stopped dealing with the Pakistani military.
Unfortunately, this is happening yet another time. However, ladies and gentlemen, I now shift to another region. That is security situation in Balochistan. Another important region of Pakistan is simmering for the last few years because of factors extrinsic to socio-political landscape of this province. The militant forces in Balochistan are devoid of a cause and political support and collude with external powers to destabilize Pakistan. Here I would like to mention that this is not our narrative, as there is an irrefutable evidence of involvement of external factors in fueling the security situation there. Pakistan's military, with the support of other state institutions, have launched a security-cum-development operation aimed at destroying the military bases, thereby normalizing the security situation and paving way for achieving development of the people of Balochistan. Towards our eastern border, world is witnessing a precarious situation of human rights violations in Indian administered Kashmir, which remains the unfinished agenda of partition between Pakistan and India. Kashmiris are waiting for their right to self-determination in accordance with United Nations Security Council resolution passed in 1949. However, even legitimate freedom struggle in Kashmir has been lumped together with terrorism. Despite having a ceasefire agreement along the line of control, the situation remains volatile because of sheer disregard of agreement from across the line of control. Since 2013, there has been an increased number of ceasefire violations from across the line of control, resulting into death and injuries to innocent Pakistani civilians. The composite dialogue process between Pakistan and India, which is generally stalled, has not progressed beyond peripheral issues like promotion of some confidence-building measures and cultural exchanges, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, during the last 2 decades, Pakistan's military and the people of Pakistan have made huge sacrifices to turn around the situation. I must highlight that the United States has spent more than $1 trillion in Afghanistan. Not even a fraction of the same has been provided to Pakistan. Despite our limited resources, and with only a modicum of international support, Pakistani nation has achieved unparalleled successes, but at a very heavy price. We have lost over 74,000 lives, and economic losses are to the tune of $123 billion US. Alongside the brave soldiers of Pakistan's military, some of the senior ranking officers have embraced Shahadat during the fight against terrorism, and our officers to soldier casualty rate is evidently reflective of this fact. The irony is that Pakistan is doing every bit. The world is not satisfied. Rather than fulfilling its obligations in Afghanistan, Pakistan is being pressurized to do more. Mantra is repeated every now and then. Let's watch how the same issue was put across to the ex-US Secretary of State in a press conference.
Yeah, let's take another question. Quick, what's the last? Yeah, please go ahead.
My name is Shamama. I'm representing the Women Chamber of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. My question will be more focused about my own province, of course. We all know that whole of Pakistan is facing the brunt of whatever is happening and trying to cooperate with the US, and somehow US is a mother-in-law which is just not satisfied with us and comes up with new ideas. So we are trying to please you, and every time you come and visit us, you have a new idea to, to tell us you're not doing enough and you need to work harder and all.
Now I come to Pakistan military's approach to national security challenges. National security structure of a state aims at developing and using the political, economic, and psychological powers of a nation together with its armed forces during peace and war to secure national objectives. National security paradigm thus provides a unifying concept to a nation's foreign policy, economic policy, defense policy, and all domestic policies to operate within one and the same framework. Following this approach, Pakistan military has been putting, we'll have to go a little faster. Pakistan military approach has been putting in earnest efforts in close coordination with other state institutions to contribute effectively towards mitigating national security challenges. To this end, Operation Al-Mizan as well as Operation Zarb-e-Azab were conducted with utmost professionalism. I will just like to make a mention of one operation which can be taken as a case study at the world level, that in Sawat operation, from a valley over a large number of population was moved out of the valley, operation was conducted. Within 3 months, the valley was cleared and they were shifted back to the valley within a period of 3 months. I would say that I would like to highlight here a few achievements made by government and security forces. And first is, you can just run through, please. Okay. Pakistan Army has conducted 187 major and 286 minor operations. 700 Al-Qaeda operators were apprehended. 6052 miscreants, including 757 foreigners. 15 operations were conducted in support of coalition forces. 995 border posts as compared to 122 inside Afghanistan were established. Writ of the government has been established. And besides military prong, a lot has been done on the development of these regions. National Counter-Terrorism Authority has been established. And in the next few slides, I would like to show you the glimpses of terrorist hideouts and large cache of arms, ammunition, and explosives recovered by law enforcement agencies. Some of the de-radicalization efforts and infrastructure development work undertaken by the government and spearheaded by the military. 2 minutes more, sir. Just 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I would say that no country has faced the challenges as Pakistan Army and Pakistan nation has faced. No country has delivered as Pakistan has delivered. And there are many lessons that can be picked up from Pakistan to fight terrorism in any other country. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General, for that very interesting presentation. Next, we have Ambassador Ravinath Arisinghe, my friend and former colleague. Ambassador Arisinghe will speak to professionalism on the battlefield and beyond. And Ambassador Arisinghe returned from Geneva, and now he is the Additional Secretary, Economic Affairs and Trade of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In Geneva, he was our ambassador to the United Nations and to the Holy See. He not only represented Sri Lanka at important forums like Human Rights Council, but equally importantly, particularly for this forum, he had the rare honor of presiding over the only multilateral security and disarmament negotiating forum in Geneva, the Conference on Disarmament, which he did admirably in that After decades of work, Geneva for the first time conference was able to achieve consensus on negotiating certain arms control and disarmament issues. Before that, of course, Ravinatha he held many positions in the Foreign Ministry and in New Delhi, posted to our mission, and then he was the Foreign Ministry spokesman and also ambassador in Brussels. Held many other positions in the human rights area in Geneva, the World Health Organization, and for the sake of time, I will not go into his detailed CV, but he's an accomplished diplomat of our foreign service. And Ambassador Hari Singh, you have the floor to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellency, distinguished delegates who are visiting us from abroad to participate in this conference, friends, I want to thank, first of all, the Vice Chancellor and the Board of Management of the Kottalalu Defence University for inviting me to participate in this conference. I'm visiting KDU after some years this week, and the manner in which it has grown is quite shocking and amazing what over a period of time an institution can do. And the manner in which, from the presentation we saw, it has become relevant to our day-to-day life is significant. My presentation will, I think the Vice Chancellor is gone, will try to add one more layer to that if I may. But I know that if the morning session was standing between extinction and new life, I stand between security and lunch. So I will try to make sure that we get through this session in the briefest of time. In recent times, conflicts near and far have shown that ending battlefield confrontation does not automatically lead to peace and security of countries and communities engulfed in conflict, particularly so when they happen to be non-international armed conflict. It is also well known that most conflicts that have emanated in the post-Cold War period, particularly what Marie Kaldor refers to as new wars, have defied conventional wisdom. This is due to the multipolarity of actors, including non-state actors such as terrorist organizations, increasing reliance on emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence in weapon systems, and the proliferation of urban warfare with much collateral damage. Modalities of confidence building to lower the threat of accidental fire is receding. There are no hotlines of communication as that which prevailed during the Cold War between the superpowers, nor are there legally binding multilateral instruments guaranteeing negative security assurances to those non-nuclear weapon states other than for a few voluntary bilateral commitments on no first use. These changes in the modes of war and conflict notwithstanding, the success in the battlefield of a military is closely linked to its professionalism and the ability for a conflict-ravaged state to reach durable peace. In this context, the compliance with international law, particularly international humanitarian law and international human rights law, plays a critical role. All professional militaries or defense forces are exposed to training on rules of warfare, and the ability to abide by them under trying circumstances is the cornerstone of professionalism of any military and defense force within the battlefield. However, despite all the training, transgressions in this regard have taken place, from the most sophisticated armed forces in the world to the ragtag combinations that have been responsible for most of the new wars. However, my focus today is not on the battlefield, but what happens beyond the battlefield, particularly what happens when the guns fall silent. How prepared armed forces to ensure that the immediate aftermath of a conflict is well managed and that the peace dividend flows to all equitably. How is it that battlefield victories are buttressed by rehabilitation, redevelopment, and reconciliation in order to ensure sustainable peace? Is there a rule book or at least a minimum template for success in this regard? Admittedly, there is growing trend that in training for security forces personnel the world over, we are seeing an increasing focus on new security issues, or what can more broadly be called, and has been this morning, called aspects of human security. Human security prioritizes non-military methods as a means of achieving security without compromising the priorities accorded to traditional security. While the traditional perspective holds that the referent object of security is the nation, state, for those who insist on security being viewed from a human security perspective, individuals are identified as the referent objective of security. Similarly, security threats are often transnational and concern the economy, the environment, migration, and health. They require multilateral and cooperative responses involving actors from governments, international organizations, civil society, and private sector worldwide. While there are many official as well as anecdotal accounts of how states and communities have grappled with these challenges, it is difficult to point to a country that has holistically dealt with these multiple challenges with any notable success. For example, despite the fact that many developed countries are largely at peace, individual and societal insecurities still prevail in terms of racial discrimination, religious intolerance, etc. Within my current topic, I therefore would like to explore with you what might seem somewhat fledgling area from a strictly military perspective, the potential for professional contribution by militaries within the larger rubric of a whole-of-government approach. Today, there is a central tool for viewing this set of issues in a more holistic and integrated manner through the prism of Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, which goes beyond merely being aspirational and offers an actionable program with 17 goals and 169 targets. Rather than approach challenges piecemeal within the context of the dichotomy of traditional security and human security, it would be more prudent for militaries the world over to integrate the SDG/2030 Sustainable Development Agenda aspects in their training, and in turn for governments to involve militaries in operationalizing the SDGs and 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. This will better prepare us to primarily avoid conflicts, and when they do occur, to meet post-conflict challenges and also to meet other emergencies in a more comprehensive manner. While SDG Goal 16 seeks to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels, in effect, this will reduce all forms of violence and propose that governments and communities find lasting solutions to conflict and insecurity in a holistic manner. That means strengthening the rule of law, reducing the flow of illicit arms, and bringing developing countries more into the center of institutions of global governance. Now, the three aspects I mentioned too, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and reconciliation, all are clearly integrated within the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Development Agenda. And while they may not be in one place, a total reading of the Development Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals provides us a clear mapping of the territory which this covers. And why I believe that this connection is important is because already, unlike when we talk about other aspects of security. The military aspects of security is clear. The non-security, the non-military aspects are still debated, while the sustainable development goals, in my view, are on the table. There are targets set, and I think it's a matter of connecting these three: the traditional security, the human security aspects, and framing it in the context of sustainable development goals, so that then we have a composite which, just as much as governments, the militaries the world over, can attach importance to in their curricula and work towards. In the national security doctrine of any country, how its military would maintain collaboration and engagement with security establishments of the other countries, and how professional collaboration can help through professional military-to-military collaboration has been laid out. Security issues where the risk of confrontation are high, but where cooperation to reduce shared dangers, joint military exercises between militaries are used. The challenge before all our countries, and particularly our military academies and universities, is as to how our militaries could evolve from being action-ready forces to being fully sensitive to meeting the new challenges. The ability to make this transition through being fully informed and integrated in the operationalization of the SDGs and the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Doing so would make these institutions truly professional. And I believe that institutions like the KDU and others, I'm sure, represented here from many countries, could take this message and try to see how we could bring within the rubric of the Sustainable Development Goals and the agenda all the activity which we have presently is located in different places within the realm of academia, because if we do so, there is a plan of action and there are some targets on which we can be judged. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those insights and suggestions that you made. And this concludes the presentation part of our discussion. And I believe we still can have about 10-15 minutes of discussions involving you, which I think we need to make full use of. So the floor is open for questions, and you may direct the question to a particular speaker or may ask the entire panel to respond.
My question goes to Dr. Gupta. So, as you pointed out, the cybersecurity as one of the unconventional threats for the international peace and harmony. So I just want to know, in the region which you are representing, SAARC, so can it be relevant to create an international consensus in a regional wise? Maybe the SAARC could be taken as a best platform for that. Because we have a very good example from European Union last year, since European Union got together to protect the cyber rights protection through the Budapest Convention on the basis of the Tallinn Manual. So I guess the SAARC could be taken as a best platform for such a task. And secondly, I just want to ask a question from the second panelist. I really don't know whether it would be appropriate to make this statement. So you talked about the needed independence for an independent Kashmir, but you see there have been allegations made towards the Azad Kashmir, or maybe the commonly called the Pakistani-controlled Kashmir. Recently, the report issued by Human Rights Watch has stated those people who want to enter the public domain should give their loyalty and fullest support for the Pakistan government unless they won't be able to take such the positions in Azad Kashmir. So I just want to know whether such incidents have made in Pakistani controlled Kashmir. Thank you.
So Dr. Gupta first and General.
So, I think cybersecurity is being discussed at various fora, including in regional fora, as you mentioned. There is this Budapest Convention for a long time, and NATO has also been discussing the Tallinn Manual, and SC also has a position on cybersecurity. There is the Asia Pacific group as well. So why not? I mean, you can discuss these in the context of South Asia also. But it's not the regional cooperation which is going to really resolve the cybersecurity issues. That's only a part of the problem. I think the problems are much more fundamental. The problem is because you are interconnected and cyberspace knows no border or no regional borders. But issues of, because you are organized in a nation state framework, so the issues of data sovereignty, the sovereignty over infrastructure, the norms of behavior in cyberspace, these issues cut across the regions and cut across various boundaries. In a regional forum, what you could discuss is perhaps, yes, if you are having a discussion at a global forum, then maybe regional countries can coordinate their positions, say on norms. Maybe you could discuss capacity building, training, education. Maybe you could try and bring together some kind of a harmony between amongst the laws, etc. So that much you can discuss. But I think the fundamental issues of who owns the data, what should you do with data? Some countries feel data should be freely shared. Somebody says no, there should be complete control over data, state control over data. These are the issues which the regional forum are not going to give solutions to.
Thank you. General?
I would like to answer the question related to Kashmir. And maybe for the sake of repetition, I would say that Kashmir is the unfinished agenda of partition of Pakistan and India. In 1947, when these countries were divided, there were certain princely states. And the option was given to these princely states to join any of the countries based on the popularity or the vote or the choice of the people of that area. This principle was not uniformly applied. India, even till today, we say that India is our big brother. The big brother, because of greater power, because of greater liberty of action, did not apply this principle uniformly. And there were certain states, mainly the Kashmir I would refer, whereby the people of Kashmir, they were not given this choice, where way to go, but the ruler was given the option to choose which country to join. Since the ruler was a non-Muslim, so he opted to join India, so India became part of Kashmir. So for this unjustified application of agreed principle, there was a war between Pakistan and India in 1948. Some part of Kashmir was taken over by Pakistan, and that I would say around 30%, 70% of Kashmir stayed with India. So at that time, in 1949, there was a resolution passed in the UN which said that there will be a plebiscite held in the state of Kashmir, both parts of Kashmir, and they will choose, the people will choose which country to join. Ex-Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, God bless his soul, he also promised that this plebiscite will be held. But later on, again, the big brother did not honor the commitments. As of now, if you talk of both the parts of Kashmir, there is a freedom struggle going on in Indian occupied Kashmir, but there is absolutely peaceful life in Pakistani held Kashmir. So there is no terrorism, there is no unrest, there is no problem being faced there. But there is a problem there in Indian occupied Kashmir. Now that's an indigenous problem. That is an external problem, internal problem. But it is always projected that this problem is being fomented or generated by Pakistan. After 9/11, unfortunately, the genuine or legitimate freedom struggles also got lumped under terrorism. So far, till today, the word has not come to an agreed definition of terrorism. The genuine freedom struggles, they are also suffering. In Pakistani held Kashmir, there is no problem. I hope I satisfy your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gupta, you wanted to say something? I didn't volunteer, you asked.
How many seconds are you giving me to
Yeah.
answer this? No, I just wanted to say that I didn't want to get drawn into this discussion. This is a university, and I'm sure the university will examine a question in its totality. And you have heard one view. You have heard that how, terrorism, how Pakistan has fought terrorism and contributed to the resolution of the terrorist problem. But there may be some other views as well. And there are other views as well. Likewise, if it were so simple, Kashmir would have been resolved by now. There is a whole history of India-Pakistan, how the two countries came to be formed, and how last 70 years or so we have still not resolved this issue. So because I don't have the time to really deal with many problems, there are many issues that have been raised. I would have liked to respond to each one of them, including how the states use non-state actors, and actually use actors and call them non-states to promote terrorism, but I don't want to go into that. I think what we wanted to really learn in this session was how the militaries can deal with non-traditional security issues. And I think today, the global trend is that there is a lot of cooperation amongst the armed forces in terms of HADR, etc. In the morning, tsunami was mentioned, and that led to impromptu cooperation among the navies, and that led to many, huge amount of discussions on HADRs, even many maritime dialogues. And today, I think we are in a different world, different age. We are talking about security issues which are much bigger than, that was the whole point of this discussion this morning. So I don't want to get into that, but I obviously do not agree with my learned panelists on most of what he said about India, Pakistan, and Kashmir, and I'm ready to, if you give me a chance at some point of time, maybe I can answer that, but that's not the issue. The issue is non-traditional security issues and how militaries deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree with you. Kashmir is perhaps not the best issue to discuss before lunch, if you are interested in lunch. Thank you, I understand. Also, I think in a way this dialogue is very important. And this dialogue also shows why, answers your question, I think, why it is not easy to discuss security issues in the SAARC framework. There are firmly held views, sometimes contrary views. At the same time, it also brings out the imperative, the necessity of finding common ground on some other issues on which we can discuss. Like it was mentioned, maybe natural disasters. They are generally politically neutral. Earthquakes and tsunamis are politically neutral. They don't see borders. So generally people are willing to discuss that. Maybe we can make a beginning. Any further questions?
Yes, may I?
Yeah, please.
Good afternoon, General Salik. I have a question for you. My name is Medhari Alvis. You spoke about Pakistan's perspective on the military approach to uphold national security. We would please like to know your opinion, General, with the appointment of your new premier. How do you look at, do you think a different military approach would be taken? And what do you think would be the new Prime Minister's policies on that, or rather his actions on that? And do you think upholding Pakistan's national security and the policy of it, would there be any salient changes? If so, what would they be and why? Thank you.
No, this. Yeah. Who would like to?
To General Salik, please.
Yeah.
My question
Yeah.
is to. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, please, yeah. Could you please,
Can you please repeat?
pointed question to him?
I'm sorry, you want a pointed question?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes. Because the question is already very pointed. Yes. What I wanted was you elaborated on Pakistan's perspective on the military approach to uphold national security. So we'd be pleased to know, General, do you think with the appointment of your new Prime Minister that there would be any differences of the military approach of Pakistan, number one? Number two, in upholding national security thereby, am I clear? Are you following me?
Yeah, absolutely clear.
In upholding national security, do you think there will be any changes with the policies of the new Prime Minister and also with the state policy thereby and the military policy? Changes? If so, what changes would there be in your opinion? And also, if there would be changes, why would there be, for what purpose, please?
Okay,
Thank you.
If I've understood the question correctly, Pakistan's, you are expecting me to say about the likely changes in our security approaches.
Likely changes with special relevance of the new Prime Minister's appointment.
Okay.
And also the military support on...
It's clear now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. As far as the new political dispensation is concerned, let me assure you that a larger section of Pakistani population is excited and happy about this change. And it's unfortunate that the environment, in the global environment, in the regional environment in which Pakistan is surviving, it is so complex and intertwined that many things which are a byproduct of the environment are seen as a national policy of Pakistan. Now, if there is a freedom struggle going on in Kashmir, there is a war going on in Afghanistan, a superpower is unable to control that small band of militants there. Another large and a very strong country is unable to control the problem there in Kashmir. Now, these issues are likely to have a problem in Pakistan also. Because Kashmir, as I said, that we are living with this problem since 1947. People have sympathies with Kashmir. People have love and affection for the people who are living there. As regards Afghanistan is concerned, we have tribes which are divided along Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Half of the tribe is in Pakistan, half of the tribe is in Afghanistan. And if I could show you the border alignment between Pakistan and Afghanistan, in certain cases it passes in the middle of villages. The mosque is in Afghanistan and half of the village is in Pakistani side. Now again in that border also, in that case, as we have in case of Kashmir, we have people living on both sides of the line who are sympathetic and favorable to each other. On that border also we have people living on both sides of the line who are sympathetic and favorable to each other. Now in the prevailing environment, I think to serve Pakistan's interest, any government will definitely work to serve Pakistan's interest. To that end, I think any government will support a legitimate freedom struggle, which may be viewed by others, because as it has been said by my brother from India, that there are different perspectives, there are different views on these perspectives. But I think any government will have to follow the policies whereby Pakistan's interests are safeguarded. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There is time for one more question.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Lieutenant Colonel Nalin Herath from Sri Lanka Armored Corps. This question goes to Mr. Aravind Gupta. Sir, this is regarding now, we discussed about the non-traditional threats. So don't you think that now, we know that every year the global defense budget is rising. So every year it normally surpasses around more than $1 trillion. Generally, it's around $1.5 trillion when it comes to global defense budget. But don't you think still the world military, the defense, the countries, they still focus on traditional threats rather than non-traditional threats? Why I am asking this question, sir, what happened in 2013 in India, Kedarnath, if I am not wrong. So when then there was this natural disaster happened, it took 11 days to Indian army to move the people from other side. So that's why I am asking this question. So thank you, sir.
I think the challenges which militaries are facing, particularly in the internal context of dealing with disasters, these are growing. And we have seen this happening very recently in Kerala floods. We have had similar things in Chennai, we have had it in Kashmir, we had it in Uttarakhand. These are of unprecedented scale. So you're right. But each episode teaches you something. So it may take some time, but it teaches you something. And as it was mentioned in the morning, it's really the social capital. It's not just the military. It's the social capital, which is what we require to build. But I think this gives me just 30 seconds to tell you that India is taking now a very systematic approach to national disaster management. We have a body headed, National Disaster Management Authority headed by the Prime Minister, and that has come out with a number of guidelines over the last few years, so a lot of awareness, etc. is there. And there is a National Disaster Force also, National Disaster Rescue Force, NDRF. Now this particular body, now it has over the last few years really built itself up, it's very well equipped, and is one of the most upcoming forces, and it has done a wonderful job in all the disaster episodes. At the same time, while they do this, NDRF does that work, but the entire assets of the three armed forces are thrown into disaster practically in no time now. I mean, firstly, there is the whole lot of these space communications, the remote sensing, etc. So alerts are being given. Then these alerts are being used by the authorities on the ground to alert the people, move them out, etc. to the extent it is possible. And then all these assets are being used together, but NDRF, NDMA is leading the effort. But at the same time, there is a massive effort which is also organized by the NGOs, etc. And now the training of these NGOs in non-disaster times, etc. is a continuous thing. So there's a lot of money which is being spent on disasters, but I agree that these disasters are of such scales, even the richest countries can't really handle it, and we have to be ready with that. And this is the point I think we should really be now looking at, how the militaries can work together and how we can start looking at HADR issues, which are becoming very important, rather than just focusing on very traditional issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I just would like to add to that's a very good, great question. Very often people associate weapons and military with security, but in the modern era, in the current times, security is much huge, much more, and also there are many non-military dimensions to security. One of which is although the military may not be involved in totally or solely involved in this the concept of security anymore, often military is called upon to respond to
civil authority, yes,
threats emanating from non-military things like natural disasters. And our tsunami case was a case in point, where Indian, Pakistanis, Russian and American navies work together. And the forces work together along with our forces to alleviate suffering. Then secondly, I am also with Professor Mohan Munasinghe involved in a thing called World Bank supported South Asia group of what they call thought leaders. Of course, we are a little bit thoughtless at that. Thought leaders to see how South Asia, having failed to come to political agreements on traditional security threat, how South Asia can now come to terms with non-traditional security threats like ecological integrity of South Asia, and how countries can work together. So a lot of work is being done, but it's not easy to come to terms with traditional issues of security in South Asia, but it is possible for people to work towards non-traditional security matters, which requires cooperation of various militaries of the region. So that is, I think, that's a very good question.
If I can,
please.
15 seconds. I think there's one more issue which we need to keep in mind when we involve militaries into these disaster aspects, etc. Because militaries ultimately are not initially trained to do this. I mean, their job is totally different, and now they're getting involved in this. It's also very important to have a framework in which the militaries are involved. You know, so that's why the civil and military equation in any country also becomes very important. So in our country, for instance, it is always an aid to civil authority, and for a very limited period, and then they go. So it's really the job is for the civilian authorities to manage the disasters. So.
Thank you very much. I think on that note, if there are no further questions, we can happily agree that it was an extremely useful discussion, and although there are no miracle solutions, we were able to understand. And also, as was said here, that there is a great deal of scope for militaries to cooperate, and civilians should try and develop a framework that will facilitate such cooperation. So with that, let me thank the panel, and let me also thank you for putting forward such robust questions to elicit some interesting answers. So that concludes this session, and maybe we can happily go for lunch.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, with that we have reached the end of the first plenary session, and I would like to express our sincere thanks to the presenters of their contribution. And may I now invite Admiral Daya Sandagiri, Chancellor, KDU, to present certificates and tokens of appreciation to the presenters of this session. Dr. Aravind Gupta. Major General Muhammad Samri Salik. Mr. Ravinatha Arya Singha. We are also thankful for the participation of the chairperson, and now we shall present a token of appreciation to Mr. Palihakara. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. How did you come? What route did you take?
Yes, sir, I went.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, all of you are invited for lunch, which will be served once again at 3 locations. Guests who are wearing red color coded lanyards will be served at the clubhouse, and guests wearing blue lanyards will be served at the medical faculty cafeteria inside KDU premises. And all other guests are requested to proceed to the cadet mess within KDU premises for lunch. And please note that there is a shuttle service available for all these 3 locations. And we kindly request you to be back at this venue by 2:50 p.m. for the second session of the plenary, so we can make use of the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.